This is not a search for facts. It is a public ritual designed to force a divine judgment. It seems barbaric to us, a terrifying gamble with a man's life. But in a world where God's intervention is seen in every sunrise and every storm, it has a brutal logic. It places the ultimate burden of proof on the Almighty. Over time, this slowly changes. Learned men and kings begin to question whether God should be tested in such a way. The concept of evidence, of witness testimony, of a jury of one's peers begins to emerge. A woman's power is not in politics or war, but in her competence. A skilled brewer or weaver is a respected figure. A woman who can manage a household through a lean winter is a quiet hero. Her knowledge of herbs and poultices makes her the family's first line of defense against illness. But her life is also one of severe constraints. Legally, she is her husband's property. She cannot own land or testify in most courts. Her value is measured by her fertility and her labor. Yet within these confines, she creates a world. This isn't a story of kings in their castles or knights in their gleaming storybook armor. This is a journey into the marrow of the past, into the lives of the uncounted millions who were born, who labored, and who died without ever leaving a name. We are here to listen to the silence between the lines of history, to feel the chill of a winter dawn in a one-room hovel, to understand the profound terror of a fever in a world without medicine. The room is thick with the scent of drying herbs and wood smoke, a small sanctuary against the world's judgments. As you work with a needle, the pretense shatters. Her whisper is as thin as a spider's thread in frost. "He was at the alehouse again," she says, not looking at you, but at the murky water. "He sold the winter pig for drink." The words fall into the silence, each one a stone dropping into a deep well. She isn't confessing a sin to a priest. She is voicing a terror to a fellow survivor. She swears that the moment it touched her flesh, the nausea receded like a frightened tide. "It wasn't the mint and ginger that cured her," she insists. "It was the stone." You nod slowly, your face a mask of serene wisdom. Inside, a familiar, complex truth settles in your gut. The stone is just a stone. You picked it from the shallows of the creek last month because you liked its shape. There is no magic in it. And now, you are the one left to carry the silence. Elspeth's eldest son, Thomas, stands by the village well. He is a man you've known since he was a boy with skinned knees, a boy you once gave a poultice for a bee sting. He sees you. There is no escaping it. His face, usually open and ruddy, is a mask of hardened clay. He doesn't look away, which is somehow worse. He just watches you approach, his eyes holding the flat, exhausted grief of a man who has sat vigil over the inevitable. The body and the soul were not separate entities. They were inextricably one. An ailment in the flesh was a wound upon the spirit. To treat one without acknowledging the other was to leave a gate open for the enemy, whether that enemy was a miasma on the wind or a sin clinging to the soul. This wasn't contradiction. It was a holistic understanding, a profound admission of humanity's limited power in the face of God's vast and terrifying world. This debt is also your burden. Their loyalty demands yours in return. Their next fever, their blighted crop, their bad luck charm, they will come to you, their faces full of hope and fear. The economy of the medieval village was not one of currency, but of obligation. A healer's wealth was measured in reputation, not silver. This meant your success was gloriously, terrifyingly public. Every life saved solidified your place, ringing your bell of status a little louder. Every death, however, chipped away at it, a quiet stain that never truly washed out. We see that the human heart, in its desperate search for meaning and comfort, has changed very little. They left no statues, but every time one human being sits with another in sickness and in fear, a piece of them remains. If the wound is healing cleanly, it is a sign from God that he is innocent. If it is festering and infected, as most wounds are in this age of filth, he is guilty and will be hanged. Or perhaps he will undergo the ordeal by water. He is bound hand and foot and thrown into the local river. If he sinks, the pure water has accepted him and he is declared innocent, though he may have already drowned. If he floats, the water has rejected his sin-filled body, and he is proven guilty. Her work is a litany of tasks that are never, ever finished. She grinds the grain for the daily bread, a grueling task done with a heavy stone quern. She brews the ale, which is safer to drink than the often contaminated water, and provides essential calories. She milks the family cow, churns the butter, and makes the cheese. She spins wool into thread and weaves the thread into rough cloth to clothe her family. This labor is the bedrock of the medieval economy, yet it goes unrecorded and unremarked upon by the chroniclers of the age. The first sound is the scrape of a wooden shutter against a stone frame, a sound that splits the pre-dawn silence. It lets in a sliver of gray light and a breath of cold air that smells of damp earth and wood smoke. Your first prayer of the day is not to God, but to the embers in the hearth, a silent plea that a spark has survived the night. You've never seen a toothbrush. You believe demons live in fog. Your town blames goats for the plague. Welcome to the Middle Ages. The woman who enters your cottage does not carry the mark of sickness. There is no fever sheen in her eyes, no rasp in her breath. Her malady is quieter, a plague of the soul that festers behind a placid face. You know her, Elspeth, wife to the stonemason, a man whose hands are as strong as his thirst. She claims a thorn is lodged deep in her palm, and you play along with the ritual, soaking her hand in a bowl of warm water steeped with yarrow. She unwraps a small piece of linen to reveal the stone you gave her. It's a simple thing, gray and smooth, worn by 1,000 years of river current. To her, it is a relic. "The tea helped," she says, her voice a reverent whisper. "It warmed my belly and quieted the worst of it." She pauses, leaning forward, her gaze intense. But the stone is a miracle. She tells you how she held it under her tongue each morning, just as you instructed, feeling its cold, solid reality against the chaotic churning inside her. You boiled horehound and coltsfoot, forcing the steam into her failing lungs until she gasped and wept. You brewed broths from scrawny chickens, so thin they were almost water, but they were warm. You held her hand, its skin as thin and dry as parchment, and you whispered a charm against the elf shot, the sudden, piercing pains you were sure were the work of unseen spirits drawn to the weak. You even promised a fine wax candle to Saint Blaise, patron of all throat ailments, if he would only intervene. He did not. God did not. Her prayers are a shield for his soul, which they believe could be snatched away by a passing demon drawn to the weakness of sickness. Your herbs are a balm for his body, the vessel that holds that soul. To a modern mind, this blending of remedies seems like a quaint hedging of bets, a sign of a people caught between superstition and nascent science. But that is not how they saw it. For them, a poultice without a prayer was incomplete. Just as a prayer without action was hollow. And then comes the true payment, something far more valuable and far more dangerous: gratitude. The family now owes you a debt. You have woven a new thread into the complex tapestry of village life, a thread of loyalty that binds them to you. This respect is your shield. Should the priest eye you with suspicion, or a neighbor's cow sicken, and the whispers turn to you, this family will be your first defense. Their testimony is worth more than a lord's decree in the small, closed world of the village green. But every shield has a weight. The fundamental contract remains the same. One human, frightened and in pain, turning to another and asking for help. You, the village healer, the mother, the neighbor, stood in that gap between fear and hope, armed not with certainty, but with care. And in the darkest of nights, they saw your lamp burning, a stubborn little light against the immense, crushing blackness. And they knew they were not entirely alone. What we gain from remembering you is not a sense of superiority, but a dose of humility. We see our own fears reflected in the strange rituals of the past. Your neighbor, a man named Will, claims his prize sheep was stolen by a man from the next village. There are no witnesses, no evidence, only Will's word against the others. In your world, how is justice found? The lord of the manor cannot simply decide. Guilt and innocence are matters for God to reveal. The accused man will face a trial by ordeal. He might be forced to carry a red-hot iron bar for 10 paces. His hand is then bound and sealed with the priest's wax seal. 3 days later, the bandage is removed. Ask yourself, is a life without freedom still a life if it is the only one you have ever known? The men's work is in the fields, a labor of muscle and sun. The women's work is everywhere else, a ceaseless, invisible current that keeps the household and the village itself from collapsing. Your Mother's Day begins in the dark, tending the fire, and ends long after the men are asleep, mending clothes by the faint light of a single candle. Her domain is the hovel, the garden plot, and the loom. You watch her small hands mimic yours, her brow furrowed in concentration as she tries to memorize the shape of a leaf. You are ensuring the chain does not break with you, that when your own hands tremble and your eyes fail, another pair will be ready to fight the same silent battles against pain and against the far more dangerous whispers of men. They left no grand monuments to their daily struggles. Their legacy is not carved in stone. It is written in our DNA. Every prayer they whispered in terror, every seed they planted against the odds, built the world we now inhabit. They survived so that we could exist. The young woman, Elspeth, stands in the low doorway, a sliver of weak sunlight framing her like a hesitant saint in a cheap woodcut. A week ago, she was the color of whey, her body stooped under the weight of a sickness that came with the dawn. Now, her cheeks hold the faint blush of a winter apple. She doesn't walk into your small hut. She glides, her eyes fixed on you with an unnerving, worshipful light. You motion for her to sit, the air thick with the scent of dried yarrow and wood smoke. The absence of a smile from the baker's wife, who now busies herself dusting flour from an apron that is already clean. Her name was Elspeth, a name like a prayer, whispered against a winter wind. And the winter had burrowed deep inside her chest, a cough that started as a rattling seed in autumn and grew into a gnarled, choking root by Christmastide. You did everything you knew. You sat with her in the dim, smoky air of her small wattle and daub home, the fire casting long, resonating. Dancing demons on the walls. He flinches but doesn't wake, lost in the inferno of his own blood. Next, you unstop a small clay bottle. The liquid inside is dark and profoundly bitter. A tea brewed from meadowsweet and willow bark, a potion for aches and fires of the blood. It is a struggle to get it between his cracked, dry lips. A little dribbles down his chin, but most of it goes down. It is a dual approach, an attack on two fronts. It cannot buy a life. Your payment is brought to you by the child's father, his face streaked with tears and dirt, his eyes holding a kind of desperate awe. He offers it with trembling hands. A half-dozen eggs, still warm from the hen, each one a perfect, fragile promise of sustenance. A small, dense loaf of dark rye bread, its crust hard enough to be a weapon, its scent the smell of survival itself. You accept them with a solemn nod. This is not a transaction. It is a sacrament. We have vanquished so many of the demons that haunted your waking nights. The infected wound, the childbirth fever, the plague that emptied entire cities. Our knowledge is a fortress against the terrors you face daily. But have we truly evolved, or have we just rebranded our anxieties? We no longer fear the failure of a poultice, but the side effects of a trial drug. We don't listen for the devil's whisper in a sick room, but we doom scroll through symptoms online, tormented by a new kind of invisible malice, our screens glowing like malevolent crystal balls. In a tragic irony, this only helps the rats, the true carriers of the infected fleas, to multiply. Faith is shaken to its core. How can a good God allow such suffering? Some turn to wild hedonism, drinking and feasting in the face of certain death. Others become flagellants, whipping themselves in the streets in a public display of penance. You watch the death cart trundle past your door, piled high with the bodies of your friends and neighbors. You are no longer living. You are simply waiting. This is not slavery in name, but it is a life lived without choice, a cage of obligations and boundaries. Yet, within this rigid structure, there are small, quiet acts of defiance. A farmer might underreport the grain yield to keep a little more for his family. A peasant might accidentally let his livestock graze on the edge of the Lord's private pasture. These are not rebellions. They are acts of survival, tiny cracks in the monolithic wall of feudal power. You learn to live within the system, to bend just enough to not break. The same knowledge that makes you a savior in the birthing room can make you a devil at the village well if a child is born with a blemish or the butter fails to churn. One failed remedy, one jealous neighbor, one drought blamed on a sour glance, and this holy book becomes a heretic's text. You are the village's hope, and therefore you are its most convenient sacrifice. Was it faith that kept this chain of knowledge alive, or the cold, hard fear of what life would be without it? We see the fragility of the systems we rely on, our medicine, our governments, our economies, and we are reminded that, like them, we are only one catastrophe away from being rendered helpless. And what still remains of them in us? More than you think. It remains in the turn of a folk song, in the shape of a church steeple against the sky, in the instinct to plant a garden, a small act of faith in the future. It remains in our capacity for resilience, a strength forged in centuries of flood, famine, and fire. The immediate, sharp agony is gone, replaced by a dull, throbbing universe of hurt. But it is a manageable hurt. It is the pain of survival. Ask yourself, When does pain cease to be a warning and become the illness itself? They lived with a threshold for agony we can scarcely imagine, an endurance born not of strength, but of a complete absence of choice. This was not a medical procedure. It was an exorcism, a violent casting out, performed by the desperate for the desperate, all under the indifferent gaze of God. The mud has a different feel today. It seems to cling to your leather turn shoes with a cold, judgmental weight. Each step a small sucking sound of disapproval. The usual morning smells, wood smoke, wet thatch, the sharp tang of the tanner's yard are muted, replaced by something you can't quite place. It's the scent of absence. The absence of a greeting from John Fletcher as he straightens arrows outside his workshop. He finds a sudden, urgent task in examining a goose feather the moment your shadow falls near him. While she whispers to the saints, you get to work. Your tools are not relics, but the humble gifts of the earth. You find the broad, cool dock leaves you gathered yesterday and mash them with a bit of water in a wooden bowl, creating a green, soothing paste. The mother watches you, her eyes hollow, but she makes space. She understands this division of labor. She is fighting on the spiritual front. You are waging war on the physical. You gently lift the boy's head and apply the cool poultice to his forehead. The baby, a girl, is finally born, slick and screaming under the rising sun that bleeds through the wattle and daub walls. The air in the hut is thick with the scent of sweat, blood, and the crushed herbs you burn to ward off malevolent spirits. You wipe your hands on a rough linen cloth, your own exhaustion a dull ache in your bones. For your night's work, for wrestling one soul back from the edge and welcoming another, you are not paid in coin. Coin is an alien language here, spoken by lords in their drafty keeps and merchants on the dusty roads. Your world was one of brutal hardship, governed by a flawed understanding of the universe. You fought death with weeds and whispers, armed with little more than experience and an astonishing resilience. You knew the terror of helplessness, the weight of responsibility, and the profound, simple grace of a fever that breaks at dawn. Your final moments were not a medical event, but a spiritual passage managed by your community. We look back from our sterile, brightly lit world of genetic sequencing and robotic surgery, and we call your age dark. People flee to the countryside, unknowingly carrying the sickness with them. Others lock themselves in their homes, hoping to wait it out. The priest, who once preached of God's mercy, now speaks of his wrath. The plague is a punishment for mankind's sins, a divine scourge. Desperate theories fly. It is caused by bad air, by the alignment of the planets, by a curse from the local Jews or a wandering leper. In some towns, they round up and kill all the cats and dogs, believing them to be the cause. Your hands are calloused, your back is permanently bowed, and by the age of 30, you will have the body of an old man. You cannot leave. To abandon the village is to become a vagrant, a ghost with no rights, hunted and despised. The Lord owns your labor, your movements, and in some ways, your future. He can demand extra work days, called boon days, to harvest his own fields. He must grant permission for you to marry someone from outside the manor. Your name will be lost to the mud and the rain. This is about the simple, pragmatic survival of your people. Your wisdom is not your own. It is a communal well from which everyone must drink. You are pouring your life's work, your mistakes, your close calls, and your triumphs into a new vessel. But here lies the quiet, curdling irony. The same hands that can draw out a fever can be accused of putting it there. They looked for signs in the heavens. We search for signals in data. Their deepest anxieties are our own, merely dressed in different clothes. What we gain when we study them is a profound and humbling sense of perspective. We see that our modern anxieties are not new. Our struggles for meaning, our fear of the unknown, and our desperate need for hope are ancient currents that have run through humanity for millennia. By looking at them without judgment, we learn to look at ourselves with more honesty. There is only force and a prayer that the root does not splinter. You clamp the pliers down. He screams, a strangled, wet sound, his massive hands gripping his own legs until the knuckles are white bone. You pull. It resists, anchored in his very soul. For a terrible second, you feel the grate of iron on bone. Then, with a sickening crack, it gives way. A torrent of blood and foul-smelling pus fills his mouth. He spits, shuddering, and in his goblet of blood is the offending thing. Dark and ugly. Ask yourself, in a life where your body is your only true possession, what do you become when it is broken? Are you still whole if a part of you is left behind in a moment of pain, forever limping just out of reach? The air inside is thick with the scent of wood smoke, old straw, and the sharp, metallic tang of fear. His mother is a statue carved from prayer. She has been at it for hours. Her rosary beads, a gift from a passing friar years ago, worn smooth as river stones. Her lips move without sound, shaping desperate bargains with the Virgin Mary, with Saint Genevieve, with any holy name that might hold purchase in heaven. You do not dismiss her faith. It is the very bedrock of her world. You are here to supplement it, not supplant it. You wrap the arm in clean linen, another of your small luxuries. The poultice will either draw out the poison or it won't. The fever will either break or it won't. You have done all you can. In a world governed by a distant male god of heaven, are you not a god in your own right? A humble god of dirt and dew, whose miracles are measured only in fevers that break and wounds that close. Your life ends as it was lived, quietly, likely in the same smoky hovel where you began. The breath that rattled in your chest finally stills. The world for you is over. You leave behind no written records, no monuments, no name that will echo in the grand halls of history. What you leave is more intimate and enduring, a legacy of eased pains, of fevers broken, of mothers who survived to hold their children. You were a thread in the tapestry of your community, unseen by kings, but essential to the strength of the cloth. The first to die is a wool carder on the edge of the village. A red cross is painted on his door, a warning to stay away. Within a week, his entire family is gone. The plague has come. The familiar world shatters. The sound of the church bell changes. It no longer tolls to mark the hours of the day. It tolls constantly, a funeral dirge for the endless dead. Fear becomes the air you breathe. Neighbor suspects neighbor. The bonds of community, forged by a lifetime of shared hardship, dissolve in terror. Your family does not own this patch of earth. You work it for the Lord of the manor. In return for his protection, a third of your life's labor is his. You wake before dawn, not by a clock, but by the changing quality of the light, and you walk to the fields. You guide a heavy, clumsy plow pulled by a weary ox, cutting a deep furrow into the earth. The work is backbreaking, repetitive, and endless. It follows the sun across the sky, and you do not stop until the light fails. It knows how to quiet a wound, how to persuade a fever to break. When a man is gored by a boar, or a woman bleeds too much in childbed, this is the prayer you offer first. You are not just teaching her about plants. You are teaching her the fragile mechanics of the human body, a machine of humors and spirits that is always threatening to break. This continuation of knowledge is a sacred duty, heavier than any stone. It is not about legacy in the way a lord imagines his name carved on a church wall. What remains of them, these people who lived and died under a different sky? Their world seems impossibly distant, but tapestry of superstition and hardship. Yet the most timeless takeaway from their lives is not their otherness, but their unnerving similarity to us. They were not simple or ignorant. They were human beings, trapped in a reality they did not choose, using the tools they had: faith, ritual, community, and grim determination to make sense of the incomprehensible. They feared plague. We fear pandemic. They feared crop failure and famine. We fear economic collapse. It is not for the pain, not really. It is for the terror. As he drinks, you retrieve your tool. Not a dentist's instrument, but a pair of crude iron pliers, blackened from the fire you use to sterilize them. He sits. You take his head in a firm grip. His entire body is a single, coiled knot of dread. You tell him to open his mouth, and the smell of rot and infection washes over you. You see it, a broken, blackened molar, swimming in a bed of swollen, weeping gum. There is no finesse here. He climbed that loft a boy, eager for his first taste of a man's drink. He will leave it something less. In a world where a man's worth is measured by the strength of his back and the endurance of his legs, a simple misstep, a moment of youthful folly, has permanently altered his fate. He will never run again. He will never swing a scythe with the same easy rhythm. His world has just become smaller, harder, and shorter. The Section 6, A Child's Fever, Prayer and Poultice. The knock on your door isn't a knock. It is a frantic, splintering sound, the kind of panicked drumming that only ever means two things in this life: the water has broken, or the reaper has come calling. You are pulled from your thin pallet and into the pre-dawn chill, following the silhouette of a neighbor through the sleeping village. You are called to a small wattle and daub hut where a child burns with a fever, a tiny human coal glowing in the gloom. As you clean the wound with boiled water and apply the poultice, your lips move. The villagers think you pray to Saint Roch, the patron of plagues, but you are murmuring the old words, the names of the herbs, the instructions for their use. It is a necessary lie. Your knowledge keeps them alive, but their fear could see you burned. Every life you save is a gamble, a prayer offered to the body's mysterious tides. They search for salvation in a cathedral's cold stone. You search for yours in the forest. The room is filled with the low murmur of prayers, a shield against the demons that are said to crowd around a deathbed, waiting to snatch a weak soul at the last moment. Your family is there, not just to comfort you, but to witness your pious end, to be able to tell the village that you died well. You fix your eyes on the wooden cross held before you, your last anchor in a fading world. The final battle is not against death itself, but against the terror of what comes after. You watch the healer, his face a mask of certainty, and you put your trust in him. You have no other choice. Is it more terrifying to face death with no hope of a cure, or to face it with a cure that is actively killing you? It starts with a rumor, a story carried by a traveling merchant from a port city 100 miles away. A strange sickness, he says, that blackens the skin and kills in days. At first, it is a distant horror, a story to be whispered around the fire. Then it arrives. You learn to identify edible roots and fungi in the woods, knowledge as vital as your prayers. Hunger makes the world sharp and clear. It erases pettiness. It binds the community together in a shared, desperate hope. But it also breeds a deep-seated fear, a knowledge that you are always just one bad harvest, one failed crop, away from utter disaster. Your world is 1 square mile of mud, thatch, and toil. You are a serf. And you belong to the land as much as the trees in the forest or the stones in the creek. It is a gift from the forest's heart. This is her first page in the unwritten book, a book with no ink, no vellum, whose pages are the turning of the seasons and whose words are whispered from one generation to the next. You move deeper, to a patch of feathery green leaves, yarrow. You pluck a stalk, crush it between your palms, and hold it out for her to feel its slightly oily texture, to smell its sharp, medicinal perfume. This one talks to blood, you explain. Ask yourself, when the heavens offer no reply and the earth offers no cure, what is left to believe in? Is it your fellow man, whose touch may now be a death sentence? Or is it only the coming dark? Section 17. Wind down reflective close. The fire burns low. The stories are told. The ghosts of this forgotten time settle back into the dust, and we are left in the quiet of our own century, the hum of electricity replacing the crackle of the hearth. He is here begging you to unmake a part of him. You are not a physician. You are a woman who knows the properties of herbs and the secrets of midwifery. But in a world where a rotten tooth is a death sentence, you are also the executioner of this tiny, agonizing tyranny. An abscess can swell the jaw, close the throat, and poison the blood. It is a quiet, personal plague. So you nod, your face grim. You pour him a cup of your own spirit, a raw, fiery brew made from fermented pears. She spreads the poultice over the swollen flesh, her hands moving with the rhythm of a desperate prayer. It is a ritual of hope, layered over a reality of brute force. A saint's whisper to soothe a devil's work. But you know the truth. You see it in the slight, stubborn curve that remains in the bone. The poultice may soothe the skin, the splints may hold the shape, but the break was too severe. It will heal, yes, God willing, but it will heal crooked. He will walk again, but with a limp that will mark him for life. The difference depends not on your intent, but entirely on the outcome. It hinges on a simple, terrifying question. Does the child live or die? Ask yourself, when salvation for the soul and survival of the body are at war, which master do you serve? The God who watches from a distance, or the fever that burns in the bed beside you? It is not the clean cut he fears, but the rust, the filth, the invisible demons that the priest warns of, the ones that creep into the blood. In an era where a rusty nail is a death sentence whispered at birth, your pouch of common weeds represents the front line of humanity's war against oblivion. You do not speak of science. That is a word for scholars in stone towers. This is a craft, a desperate, accumulated wisdom, a logic guided by observation, superstition, and raw courage. You whisper your lifetime of small sins into his ear, the envy you felt for your neighbor's harvest, the curses you muttered at the Lord, the lustful thoughts you had as a young man. The priest anoints your eyes, your ears, your mouth, and your hands with holy oil, cleansing the senses that led you into sin. He gives you the viaticum, the final Holy Communion, food for your journey into the afterlife. It is the primary medical treatment for almost every ailment, from headaches to the plague. If bloodletting doesn't work, other remedies are tried. You might be given foul-tasting potions made of herbs, animal dung, and wine, meant to purge the body. A poultice of chewed bread and cobwebs might be placed on a wound to staunch bleeding. These cures are a strange and often lethal cocktail of classical theory, folk wisdom, and pure superstition. Sometimes, by sheer chance, an herbal remedy works. More often, the cure is more dangerous than the disease. A child who dies in winter is a tragedy, but it is also, in the brutal calculus of survival, one less mouth to feed. You see how your parents watch the sky, how a week without rain can carve new lines of worry onto their faces. You learn that waste is the greatest sin. Every part of a slaughtered pig is used, from the bristles for brushes to the blood for sausage. Nothing is discarded. This is not a philosophy. It is a necessity. Look, but never touch, you command, your voice a low hum. This is the destroying angel, beautiful, white as a christening gown, and it will turn your liver to water before the next moon. Her eyes widen, a perfect mirror of fear and fascination. You are teaching her the grammar of death, the first and most important lesson. Then, a few paces away, you show her its cousin, the golden-fluted chanterelle, smelling of apricots. And this, you say, letting her touch its firm, wavy flesh. This will fill a hungry belly when the harvest is thin. If God is punishing sin, then why do the most pious fall? If he is protecting the faithful, then why are the churches becoming tombs? A far more terrible thought begins to form in the quiet corners of your mind, a heresy too awful to speak aloud. What if this isn't a punishment? What if it is simply chaos? A force of nature as meaningless as a rock slide, as vast and incomprehensible as the ocean. What if God is not angry? What if he has simply fallen silent and you have been left utterly, terrifyingly alone? You know his wife has made him poultices of henbane and onion, and he has knelt in the damp little church until his knees were numb, praying to Saint Apollonia, she who was martyred by having her teeth shattered. But the saints are silent, and the herbs have failed. The pain he finally rasps is a white-hot poker driven up into his eye, a relentless ringing that drowns out the evening bells, a madness that has not let him sleep for 3 nights. He is here as a last resort. When it is over, a dreadful quiet falls. Thomas is mercifully unconscious, his face pale as winter milk. His leg is straight, mostly. You and his father, breathing in ragged, shuddering gasps, do not look at each other. The shared knowledge is too heavy. You bind the limb with rough-hewn splints of ashwood and strips of linen torn from an old shirt. The boy's mother, who had been hiding her face, now comes forward with a bowl of steaming green-black mash. Comfrey, knitbone, they call it. You know the poultice that can draw the poison from a wound that would otherwise fester and steal a worker from the Lord's harvest. This creates the unspoken rivalry that defines your world. It is a quiet war fought not with swords, but with whispers, with poultices, with rosaries. He is the shepherd of their eternity, but you are the guardian of their fragile, painful present. This is the constant, exhausting negotiation of the age, a bargain struck daily with the divine and the profane, where the very same act can be named a miracle or condemned as witchcraft. Inside is your greatest secret and your most common magic, a poultice of comfrey root and bread left to turn blue with mold, mashed into a foul-smelling but sacred paste. The shadow falls across your doorway before the sound arrives. It's Thomas, the woodcutter, his face pale as stripped birch. He holds his arm, wrapped in a rag already dark with blood and something worse. A slip of the axe, he murmurs, but you see the angry red lines already snaking from the gash. To die badly, suddenly, without a priest, without confessing your sins, is to risk an eternity in hell. A good death is a performance, a carefully staged exit from this world into the next. Your family gathers around your straw pallet. They do not weep or show excessive grief. That would be seen as a lack of faith in God's plan and might trouble your departing soul. The priest is summoned. He is the most important man in the room. He hears your final confession. A healthy person has these humors in perfect equilibrium. A fever means you have an excess of blood associated with fire and air. The cure seems logical. You must remove the excess. The barber surgeon is called. He is not a doctor, but a man who cuts hair and performs minor procedures. He ties a leather strap around your arm, makes a swift cut with a sharp blade called a phleem, and drains your blood into a bowl. You lie there, weakened and pale, while your life force spills out. This is called bloodletting. Summer brings a brief, glorious reprieve. Wild berries, fresh vegetables from the small garden plot, the promise of the ripening grain. Autumn is the season of frantic work and fleeting abundance, a race against the coming frost. The harvest is everything. It is life. It is the only thing that stands between your village and the gnawing emptiness of winter. This perpetual scarcity shapes morality. A stolen loaf of bread is not a minor infraction. It is a theft of life from the entire community. The air in the woods is different. It holds its breath, thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, a smell that is both rot and rebirth. Your own daughter, or perhaps a clever niece with your eyes, now follows you. Her footfalls are too loud, snapping twigs you would have avoided, but she is learning. You lead her to the base of an ancient oak, its roots like the gnarled knuckles of a sleeping giant. There, in a small, pale cluster, they grow. You point with a finger stained by berry juice and soil. God is just. The righteous are protected, sinners are punished. A blight on the crops is a sign of His displeasure. A stillborn child is a test of faith. Every event has a reason, a celestial logic you can appeal to with prayer, with penance, with the intercession of a saint. But this plague makes a mockery of that logic. The merchant says it takes the priest and the prostitute, the newborn and the elder, the devout and the blasphemer with equal, horrifying indifference. It shatters the very framework of your world. He whimpers, a sound so broken and foreign from this man that it chills the air more than the evening mist. You already know. You have seen this shadow fall over others. It is the tooth worm, the malevolent spirit that nests in bone and feasts on the living. He has tried everything. You can smell the sour tang of cheap, potent ale on his breath, a failed anesthetic. The father gives a single sharp nod. He pulls. The sound that follows is a wet, grinding crack that is somehow worse than the scream. It is the sound of life being violently reassembled. The boy's body arches, a bowstring of pure torment, a muffled, guttural howl forced through the rag you stuffed in his mouth. For a moment that stretches into a season, you are not men helping a boy. You are three bodies locked in a primal, necessary violence. It is an act of love that feels indistinguishable from an act of torture. Sickness is not merely a failing of the body. It is a stain on the soul, a judgment passed down for some forgotten sin or a moment of blasphemous pride. The village believes this as surely as they believe the sun will rise. Father Michael offers the only cure that truly matters: absolution, the cleansing of that spiritual stain, salvation for the immortal soul. He holds the keys to heaven, but you hold the remedy for the grinding colic that keeps a man from his knees in prayer. Here is the twist of dried foxglove, its purple flowers long since crumbled to dust. A poison and a cure in one, a dangerous whisper for a heart that flutters like a trapped bird. You handle it with a reverence born of fear, a knowledge passed down from your mother, who learned it from hers. Beside it, a bundle of willow bark, to be chewed for the fire that rages behind the eyes in a fever dream. And then, the small clay pot. There are no pensions, no retirement homes. Your survival depends entirely on the charity and patience of your children. You sit by the fire, a ghost in your own home, and you wonder, am I a respected elder, or am I just waiting to die? The cough that started in autumn has settled deep in your chest. Each breath is a shallow, rattling struggle. You know the end is near. It is time to prepare for the good death. This is the final, most important ritual of your life. It is a flawed, cynical system, yet it gives people a sense of agency over their own eternal destiny. Your body is a mystery, a vessel of warring forces you cannot comprehend. When you get sick, it is not a matter of germs or viruses. Those concepts are centuries away. Illness is an imbalance, a battle fought within your own skin. The learned men and the village healer who mimics them believe your body is governed by four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. These correspond to the four elements: air, water, fire, and earth. It is a constant, dull ache in your belly, a quiet hum beneath the rhythms of the day. You learn to read the seasons not by a calendar, but by the contents of the communal bowl. Spring is the hungry gap, the cruelest time, when the winter stores of dried meat and salted fish are gone, and the first greens have not yet pushed through the soil. You eat nettle soup and bread made with more bark than flour. Your dreams are of the harvest. In an age obsessed with its own reflection, we have forgotten what it means to be defined not by how we see ourselves, but by our impact. Your legacy isn't an image you craft. It's the mark you leave on the lives you touch, for better or for worse. What happens to the soul when it is not observed by its owner, but defined entirely by the village? Is it a purer existence, or is it a cage doped by the needs of others? You clutch the small leather pouch at your belt, the one filled with dried yarrow and a shard of blessed iron. It has always been enough. It kept the rot from the grain and the fever from your youngest child. But as the merchant describes the black swellings, the swift and merciless end, your charms feel like what they are: dried leaves and a piece of metal. A child's sandcastle against a coming tide. This news doesn't just bring fear, it brings a profound and terrifying confusion. The world as you know it, operates on a set of sacred rules. He comes to you at dusk, a giant made small. It is Thomas, the blacksmith, a man whose arms are thick as yew branches, whose laughter is a forge bellow. But there is no laughter now. He fills the doorframe of your small hut, his broad shoulders slumped, one hand cradling his jaw as if it were a wounded bird. His face, usually ruddy from the fire and stained with soot, is the color of old parchment, slick with a feverish sweat. He does not speak. The father's face is a mask of stone, but his eyes betray the flood of terror and love warring within him. This is a harvest of pain, and you are both the reapers. You are the one who has to hold him. You grab his shoulders, pinning his thrashing torso to the ground, as his father grips the boy's foot and thigh. Thomas's eyes, wide with shock and the dregs of his first drunken revelry, lock onto yours. He doesn't see you anymore. He sees only a world that has dissolved into a universe of white-hot agony. The quiet words you mutter over a sick child, a rhythmic plea for the heat to break, are a prayer to the Virgin, unless they are an incantation to a darker, older power. You are two things at once in his eyes, a pillar of this small, fragile community and its most convenient, most plausible scapegoat. The bell in his church tower rings for births, for weddings, and for the dead. He worries you are trying to silence it. In this life, there is no wall between the spirit and the flesh, between God's will and a bloody flux. You smooth the rag across the packed earth floor. It's surprisingly clean, a small island of order in a world of mud and chaos. One by one, you lay out your instruments on this humble altar. They are not the gleaming steel of a physician in a far-off city, tools bought for a king's ransom. They are extensions of the earth itself, pulled from the damp soil and shadowed woods, smelling of life and decay. This is your arsenal, your physical manifestation of hope against overwhelming odds. You are the one who remembers the great storm of 78, or the face of the old lord who died 30 years ago. You hold the village's history in your fading mind. You teach the children the old songs and the proper way to appease the spirits in the woods. You are a source of wisdom, but you are also a burden. You are another mouth to feed, a body that requires care. You watch your son and his wife, their faces etched with the same weariness you once wore, and you feel the sting of your own dependency. The belief is tangible. Physical proximity to holiness can scrub your soul clean. For the poor, like you, pilgrimage is an impossible dream. Your penance is simpler. A few extra prayers, a fast, or a small offering of a coin you cannot spare. This system creates a spiritual economy where the rich have a much easier path to heaven. It's a source of profound anxiety, but also a strange kind of hope. It suggests that damnation is not inevitable, that your fate is not sealed. You can, if you are pious enough or wealthy enough, bargain with God. The world is swarming with a pantheon of these specialists. Saint Anthony for lost things, Saint Blaise for ailments of the throat, Saint Margaret for women in childbirth. It's a bureaucracy of holiness, a way of organizing the terrifying randomness of the universe into something manageable. Was it faith that guided them? This desperate mapping of divinity onto every aspect of life? Or was it the profound human need to feel that someone, somewhere, was listening? The first lesson you learn is the language of hunger. You are the cold, unforgiving memory of the old woman by the creek, the one whose poultice did nothing, whose life slipped away like smoke while her family watched you. their silent judgment a heavier stone than any priest could cast. Each of them holds a piece of you. You are the cunning woman, the healer, Eleanor's savior, the one who failed. Your identity is not a private treasure, curated and polished in secret. It is a public ledger, written in the fears and hopes of your neighbors. He speaks of the South, of port cities where the ships lie silent in the harbor, their sails rotting on the masts. He whispers of a sickness, a great pestilence. It isn't a pox, you understand, nor a fever that breaks with sweat and herbs. This is something else. It moves, he says, faster than a man on horseback, leaving villages hollowed out, the doors swinging open on empty homes. A chill, entirely separate from the autumn air, creeps up your spine. Ask yourself, in a world without science, only secrets, would your knowledge be seen as a gift or a threat? Would the garden that keeps you alive also be the thing that condemns you? This is the precarious balance of your life. To know the earth is to survive it, but to know it too well is to invite its most dangerous creature. Man, the bone, a pale splinter of white, has torn through his woolen breeches and skin, a gruesome flag planted in his own flesh. You and his father, a man whose hands are usually gentle with his livestock and firm with his tools, share a look. There are no words for this. There is no town physician to call, no learned man with books and clean instruments. There is only the barn, the boy, and the terrible, swift knowledge of what must be done. To him, you do not just practice a craft. You walk a knife's edge over a chasm of damnation. Your work, this ancient knowledge passed down from your mother and her mother before her, skirts a dangerous and invisible line. The yarrow in your pouch, the willow bark you boil for pain, the cool cloths you lay on a burning forehead, these are gifts from God, blessings woven into the very soil of His creation. Unless, of course, they are tools of the devil, clever deceptions to turn a soul from proper prayer. The line is so blurry, it has ceased to exist. And right now, as you kneel in the filth and gently, carefully feel for the baby's position, you know the numbers are not adding up. The child is turned wrong, a breach, a death sentence sealed in the womb. And everyone in this suffocating, smoky room is looking to you for a miracle you do not possess. Your joints swell and burn with a fire that never goes out, a cruel mockery of the hearth you can no longer easily kneel before. You are growing old. In a world that values physical strength above all else, to age is to become a liability. You can no longer work the fields from sunup to sundown. Your hands, once so strong on the plow, now tremble. Your value shifts. You are no longer a unit of labor, but a repository of memory. Salvation has a price tag. This is the marketplace of sin. You can buy an indulgence, a certificate signed by a bishop that promises to reduce your time in purgatory, that terrible waiting room between heaven and hell. You can pay for a priest to say a mass for the soul of your dead mother. The wealthy can go on pilgrimage to a distant shrine to see a splinter of the true cross or the finger bone of a saint. These relics are magnets for money and faith. Your family will light candles at his altar, offer up a small portion of their meager earnings, and observe his feast day with reverence. In return, the saint is expected to intervene, to speak to God on your behalf, to guard you from the 1,000 daily perils of this life. It is a deeply personal, almost transactional form of belief. God is a distant, awesome king, too grand and terrible to approach directly. But a saint is a local lord, a familiar advocate who understands the mud and the toil of human existence. You are the flicker of hope in Eleanor's eyes when you brought her boy back from the fever with yarrow tea and whispered prayers to St. Giles. You are the shadow of contempt in her husband's face, because he believes you used something other than prayer. You are the desperate plea in the young wife's face, her hand on her flat stomach, asking for a charm to make her womb quicken. Section 13. Title: When God Falls Silent. The merchant arrives on a Tuesday, his cart wheels groaning under the weight of salt, cheap tin pots, and rumors. He is a welcome sight. His face is new, his stories a break from the endless rhythm of planting and praying. You gather with the others in the muddy track that serves as a town square, listening as he hawks his wares. But today, his voice is lower, his eyes heavy with the road. The line between a saint's blessing and a devil's curse is written in the gossip of fearful women at the well. The earth is not just dirt, it is a living apothecary, a codex of survival. For us, a flower is a decoration, a weed is an annoyance. For you, the difference between them is the difference between a child's fever breaking and the tolling of the death bell. We are profoundly, safely disconnected from the sources of our own medicine. We trust a label, a foil pack, a doctor's prescription. You trust the earth under your feet. The air is thick with the scent of hay, spilled ale, and something else. The sharp, metallic tang of raw fear. The scream is not human. It is the sound an animal makes when it knows the trap has closed. A shriek that scrapes the rafters and seems to claw at the very timbers of the loft. Below, on the hard-packed earth of the barn floor, young Thomas lies twisted. His leg is bent at an angle that is sickeningly wrong, a second knee halfway down his shin. As you step from the low, smoky doorway of the farmer's cot, the smell of damp earth and lingering fever clings to your woolen cloak. You pull the rough fabric tighter, a futile gesture against the chill that has little to do with the autumn air. Across the muddy track, you see him, Father Michael. He stands framed in the dark maw of his small stone church, his hands clasped behind his back. He is not moving. He is simply watching you, and his face is as unreadable as a worn grave marker. He sees you, the village cunning woman, and hopes you are a miracle worker. The village priest, Father John, sees you and suspects you are a devil worshiper. Your knowledge of herbs, a dangerous flirtation with the pagan world. You know the truth is far more terrifying. You are simply a woman who has paid attention. You have watched, you have listened, and you have memorized the fragile, brutal arithmetic of life and death. Was it faith that kept the last child from the fever? Or was it the willow bark tea you prescribed? But if that love never blossoms, it does not matter. The contract remains. The duties must be performed. The cow still gives milk. The world begins to shrink. First, it is your vision. The fine details of a carving, the thread in a needle, they blur into a frustrating haze. Then, it is your hearing. The high-pitched laughter of your grandchildren fades. The words of the priest become a low mumble. Your teeth, worn down by years of stone-ground grit in your bread, ache and fall out one by one. Oak, your soul is a commodity. You learn this early. The church teaches that you are born in sin, and every day you add to that debt through greed, envy, anger, or lust. The afterlife is a terrifying landscape of eternal torment, described in vivid detail by the priest in his sermons and depicted in the gruesome paintings on the church walls. Hell is not an abstract concept. It is a very real, very hot, and very crowded place, waiting for the vast majority of humanity. But the Church, in its mercy, offers a way out. From this day forward, every prayer for your safety, every plea for your health, will be directed through Him. Your name is a link in a chain of obligation, tying you to a powerful, invisible protector in heaven. It is your first and most important relationship. When you fall and break a bone, it is St. Thomas your mother will petition. When you are lost in the woods, it is his name you will be taught to whisper. This isn't just about faith. It's a spiritual contract. A fresh scratch from a briar cuts a red line across a forehead streaked with dirt. The eyes are older than your 20 years, ancient things that have seen a child's last breath and a calf's first steps in the same day. There are no mirrors in your cottage. There is no time for such things. Your sense of self is not built on this strange, watery image. It is built on the faces of those who look to you. This is history you can feel in your bones, a journey into the quiet, desperate, and beautiful reality of human survival. If you love immersive, real storytelling about survival, belief, and forgotten lives, hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Drop a comment with the medieval fact that surprised you most, or what role you think you'd play if you were born in the year 1287. Let's begin and live the life they never got to finish. The same skills that mark you as a healer in one neighbor's eyes mark you as something else in another's. Your quiet conversations with the herbs, your knowledge of what to pick under a full moon, the way you mix a draught that can bring on a woman's delayed blood, these are acts of power. And power in a woman with dirt under her nails and no husband of rank is easily mistaken for witchcraft. Every successful cure is a miracle. Every failure, a potential accusation. Ask yourself, when knowledge is not a commodity to be looked up, but a part of your soul you carry every waking moment, does it become a heavier burden or a lighter one? Yet we cling to our own flawed maps, fad diets promising to cleanse our systems, wellness trends rebalancing our energies, pop psychology offering neat boxes for the sprawling wilderness of the human mind. The human need for a system, any system, to explain the mysteries of our own biology has hardly changed at all. Godwin nods, his eyes filled not with understanding of the theory, but with the simple, desperate relief of having a plan. He believes in the cure, and for now, perhaps that is the only part of it that truly works. I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request. Her duty is to manage the home, to be obedient, and most importantly, to produce children, especially sons, who will work the land after you are gone. Affection is not a prerequisite. It is a potential byproduct, a quiet plant that might, with luck and time, grow in the hard soil of obligation. You might learn to appreciate her skill at the loom, or the way she hums while she works. She might come to rely on your steady presence, your strength. You might find a quiet companionship in the shared struggle of raising a family and surviving the seasons. The lean, penitential season of Lent gives way to the joyful celebration of Easter. The long, hot days of summer lead to Michaelmas, the feast of the Archangel Michael, a time for settling debts and accounts. The year ends with the deep, cold darkness of Advent, waiting for the symbolic rebirth of light at Christmas. Your entire life, from the cradle to the grave, is lived within this grand, overarching narrative. Was this a comfort? This sense of order and divine purpose imposed on a chaotic world? Was it the most effective system of social control ever devised? Ask yourself, when every shadow holds a potential demon and every cold draft a fatal illness, is superstition a weakness, or is it the only available armor for the soul? Your name is not chosen. It is assigned. It is a shield. You are named Thomas, not for a grandparent, but for a saint, a celestial patron who will now be responsible for your soul. Your parents, illiterate and devout, chose him because his feast day was near your birth. Or perhaps because he is the patron saint of builders and your father is a carpenter. You stop, not out of vanity, a sin you can't even afford, but out of a strange, animal curiosity. You kneel, the damp seeping through the rough fabric at your knees, and you look. The face that stares back is not one you know. It is a stranger's face. You last saw yourself, truly saw yourself, in a polished pewter dish at the Reeves table 2 harvests ago. And the girl in that distorted reflection was someone else entirely. This face is sharper, the cheekbones like blades beneath skin stretched thin by worry. We are here to feel the grit of the harvest, the chill of a winter with too little firewood, and the terror of a shadow that falls across the village. We will explore not just what they did, but what they believed. How superstition was a form of science, a way to impose order on a world of chaos. How faith was not a gentle comfort, but a desperate, roaring fire against the endless night. We will walk in their footsteps, feel their fears, and ask the questions they were too afraid to whisper. This wisdom was poured into you, a legacy from your mother, who learned it from hers, a chain of whispers stretching back into the mist of time. This garden is your pharmacy, your laboratory, and your sanctuary. Each plant has a temperament, a season, a spirit. The yarrow closes wounds, staunching the lifeblood from a careless slip of a woodsman's axe. The comfrey, they call it knitbone, and for good reason. Its poultice can soothe the deep ache of a fracture, encouraging the body to heal itself. But this knowledge is a dangerous currency. This makes your wisdom deeply personal, but it also paints a target on your back. You walk a blade's edge between healer and witch, between gratitude and suspicion. We live in an age of infinite, accessible information, a flood of facts so vast it drowns us. We can learn the science of a plant in seconds, yet we could not identify it in a field of 1,000 others. You had a finite amount of knowledge, but it was woven into the very fabric of your being, as real and tangible as the calluses on your hands. Yet it provided a framework for chaos, a sense of control in the face of random, agonizing suffering. It gave you, the healer, a purpose, and it gave Godwin, the patient, a path. Ask yourself, what is the value of a map that shows the wrong landscape, but gives the traveler the courage to take the next step? We scoff at this ignorance from the safety of our own century. Inside, it holds your life's work, the bitter harvest of your experience. Yarrow to staunch the bleeding, raspberry leaf to ease the womb's anger, a smooth, cold stone from the river for the mother to grip, and a small, sharp knife that you pray to God and all the saints you will not have to use. The hovel smells of fear. It's a thick, cloying cocktail of sweat, blood, peat smoke, and dance straw. This is the language of love in your world, a practical, unsentimental assessment of survival. She, in turn, knows that you are a strong worker and that your family's plot of land is reasonably fertile. The priest blesses the union in the church doorway. There is a small feast, a celebration not of romance, but of a new economic and social alliance. Your duty as a husband is to provide for and protect your household. This is not time measured in minutes and hours. It is time measured in piety and work. The bell is God's timetable, and it structures every aspect of your existence. The week is also marked by the church. Sunday is the Lord's day, a day of rest from field labor, but not from obligation. You stand for hours on the cold stone floor of the church, not understanding the Latin of the Mass, but absorbing its power and its mystery through the incense, the chanting, and the sheer intimidating authority of the priest. The year itself is a religious drama. They are the only weapons they have. Your father, kept outside the birthing room lest his male presence curdle the mother's milk or attract ill fortune, listens for a strong cry. The silence between each of your breaths is a chasm of fear. Was it a strong birth? Does the child look hale? Or does it bear the mark of a curse, a changeling left by the fae in the woods? The rain has finally stopped. For the first time in a week, the wind does not claw at the wattle and daub walls of the village. It holds its breath. The air, washed clean of dust and smoke, smells of wet earth and distant wood rot. You are returning from the fen, the hem of your woolen tunic soaked and heavy with mud, a small pouch of willow bark tied at your waist. It is on this rare, still day that you see it. A large puddle, settled in a deep cart rut, has become a perfect, dark mirror. This isn't a story of kings and crowns, of glorious battles or knights in shining armor. This is a story of the dark spaces in between. This is sleepy history, and we are here for the forgotten lives. For the woman who knows the name of every herb that can soothe a fever, but not the name of the king who rules her. For the man whose entire world is the field he plows, the sky above it, and the God who watches them both. Johnswort, its sunny perforated leaves holding the power to chase away the shadow of melancholy that sometimes grips your husband after a poor harvest. You murmur a quiet thanks, a private prayer, not to God, but to the plant itself. A little farther on, the calendula, like trapped bits of sunlight, waits patiently. You know its secret for soothing the angry red skin of a burn or a stubborn rash on the baby. This is not knowledge you learned from a book. You cannot read. In this world, your authority doesn't come from a seal on a document. It comes from the quiet miracle of a fever breaking, a wound closing without festering, a baby drawing its first full breath. The priest has his holy water and his Latin, but the villagers come to you when their child's cough rattles the cottage walls like a death knell. They trust the evidence of their own eyes over words they cannot understand. Your knowledge is proven, not proclaimed. It is a living thing, tested by generations of winter chills and summer sicknesses. He must be dried. And then you consider the final, most direct intervention. You may need to perform a small, careful bloodletting, not a savage draining, but a precise release, a tiny incision with a clean lancet at the cephalic vein in his arm to let the bad blood, the peccant humor, escape his body and restore its delicate, God-given equilibrium. This theory, inherited from the ancient Greeks and polished by centuries of unquestioning belief, was the medical map of your world. It was elegant, it was symmetrical, and it was almost entirely wrong. In this village of 50 souls, nestled in the damp armpit of a lord's forest, you are the closest thing to a doctor, a shaman, or a prayer answered. You grab your leather pouch, the one that smells of dried lavender, iron, and something vaguely metallic. You are 20 years old, and your father has arranged a match with a girl from a neighboring farm. You have spoken to her only twice, under the watchful eyes of her parents. You do not know if she is kind or clever, if she has a quick temper or a gentle spirit. What you know is that her family can offer a healthy dowry, a cow and 2 pigs. This is a good match. The cow means milk and cheese. The pigs mean meat for the winter. The first bell, matins, rings in the darkness, a call to prayer for the monks that doubles as a signal for the village to begin its labor. The bell for sext marks midday, a brief pause for a meal of bread and ale in the fields. Vespers rings as the sun begins to set, signaling the end of the workday. Compline is the last bell, the one that calls the world to silence and sleep, locking the village down against the dangers of the night. You are not yet a person. You are a possibility, a fragile flicker in a profound darkness. Your survival through the first hours, the first days, is a battle waged not with knowledge, but with ritual. You are rubbed with salt to toughen your skin and given a taste of honey to cleanse your innards. Your mother is fed special broths, not for their nutrients, which are poorly understood, but to restore the balance of her humors, thrown into chaos by the violence of birth. These are acts of faith, whispered traditions passed from mother to daughter. Ask yourself, when you become the living repository for a village's shame and its fragile dreams, does your own soul learn to fly, or does it become chained to the earth by the sorrows of others? Section 1. Introduction. The first splinter of dawn cuts through the cracks in the shutters, smelling of wet earth and dying embers. A dog barks once, a sharp, lonely sound that hangs in the cold air. From the church on the hill, a single bell tolls for matins, the morning prayer, but it sounds less like a call to God and more like a warning. You've never seen a toothbrush. You believe demons live in fog. Your town blames goats for the plague. Welcome to the Middle Ages. The afternoon sun is a warm hand on the back of your neck. Behind your wattle and daub hovel, this small patch of chaos is your kingdom. It isn't neat, it isn't orderly. To the village priest, it might look like a tangle of weeds, but testament to lazy hands. But you see it for what it truly is, a library written in root and leaf. You kneel, the damp earth staining your tunic. Your fingers, calloused and knowing, brush against a familiar friend. Here is the saint. This is an inheritance more valuable than land or title. It is a chain of whispers, stretching back into the mist of time, passed from mother to daughter, an oral testament to survival. It is also exquisitely fragile. If you were to slip on the moss-slicked stones of the creek tomorrow, if a fever were to take you in the night, a library of practical wisdom would be lost forever. An encyclopedia of poultices, tinctures, and teas would vanish, its pages turning to dust with your last breath. The heat of it is scorching his lungs, fueling his anger. His body is like a field flooded by a spring river, too much life, drowning the crop. The cure, therefore, is not a matter of guesswork. It is a matter of simple, elegant logic. The cure must be its opposite. You prescribe a diet of watery, cooling things. Cucumbers, lettuce, and melons. You tell him to eat fish from cold streams, not the rich, blood-making red meat of an ox. You forbid him wine, that treacherous liquid that heats the very humor he has in excess. He must be cooled. You don't need to ask who it is. You swing your legs from the straw-tick mattress, your feet finding the familiar cold that seeps up from the ground. It's Thomas, the woodcutter's boy, his face a pale moon in the pre-dawn gloom, his breath coming in white puffs of terror. His mother, Eleanor, is in labor. Her first was easy, he gasps, quick as a summer shower. But this one is stuck. You are not a midwife by choice, but by necessity. Of course, the church frowns upon it. The priest preaches against the evils of drink and the idleness of the tavern. It is a place of sin, of loose talk and looser morals. But everyone knows that a life of unceasing toil and prayer needs a release valve. The tavern is that valve. It is the cold comfort that makes the next day and the day after that bearable. Love is a word for poets and nobles. For you, marriage is a contract. These beliefs are a map of fear, a way of giving a name and a set of rules to the terrifying power of nature. The howl of a wolf in the night isn't just an animal sound. It is a reminder of the thin, fragile wall of civilization that separates your small, smoky world from an ancient, untamable wildness. The only clock you know is the bell in the church tower. Its tolling slices the day into sacred, non-negotiable portions. There is no applause, no celebration, only a tense, held breath. The first question is not boy or girl, but will it live? Your mother, exhausted and trembling, watches as the midwife, a woman named Era, who has seen 100 such births, clears your mouth with a finger and swaddles you in rough-spun wool. She makes the sign of the cross over your tiny body, a quick ward against the unseen evils that flock to the vulnerable. In this world, nearly half of all children will not see their 5th birthday. Your counsel comes with the weight of genuine consequence, because their misfortune will inevitably arrive at your door. You finish with Elspeth's hand, wrapping it in clean linen. You give her a bundle of chamomile. For your nerves, you say, a code for the unbearable weight she carries. She presses a small, warm egg into your hand as payment and leaves without another word. The egg is food, but the true payment was the secret itself, another soul's burden added to your own. The mind's ability to shape its own reality is a force as old as humanity, a quiet magic that works in the dark, forgotten corners of survival. As Elspeth leaves, clutching her miracle, you wonder, is it faith that saves them? Or is it simply that belief is the only shelter strong enough to stand against the relentless storm of the unknown? The ghost of Elspeth's final, rattling breath doesn't just haunt her cottage. It now walks beside you through the village, a visible specter of your own human frailty. Ask yourself, when the only thing you truly have to offer is the faith others place in you, what happens when that faith is shaken? You don't just lose a patient, you lose a piece of the invisible armor that holds a community together against the dark. You bring the leaf to your nose. It is not the smell you seek. This one is bitter, a liar. It mimics the true herb, a trick of the devil to fool the unwary. Your grandmother's voice is a phantom in your ear. The good leaf feels like an old man's beard, she'd say, her own hands guiding yours. The false one is smooth as a liar's promise. And so you know. You remember the feel of a dozen different leaves, the specific, earthy perfume of a root that signals it's ready to be pulled. To you, these are not disparate symptoms of a sickness in the lungs or a failing of the spirit. They are all expressions of a single, fundamental imbalance. You see the world through the lens you were given, the only one that makes sense of the body's betrayals. The four humors. Godwin, you conclude, has an excess of blood. The sanguine humor, hot and moist, like the air of springtime. It is the humor of courage, of passion, of life itself. But too much of a good thing is a poison. If you love immersive, real storytelling about survival, belief, and forgotten lives, hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Drop a comment with the medieval fact that surprised you most, or what role you think you'd play if you were born in the year 1287. Let's begin and live the life they never got to finish. The sound that rips you from sleep isn't a fox or a wolf. It's human. A panicked, frantic banging on your wattle and daub door that rattles the frame and sends a dusting of dried mud onto the packed earth floor. You sit on a rough-hewn bench, listening to the conversations around you. A group of men in the corner argues about the price of wool. Two women whisper about the priest's new housekeeper. A traveling peddler tells an exaggerated story about a two-headed calf born in a distant shire. For a few hours, you are not just a serf, a cog in the feudal machine. You are part of a community, a loud, chaotic, vibrant human tapestry. The laughter is a shield against the darkness outside. The shared drink is a sacrament of fellowship. You do not enter the deep woods after dark. Everyone knows that is where the Fae, the old spirits, still dwell. You know the stories of changelings, of men led astray by phantom lights, of beasts that are not holy beasts. The gnarled oak at the edge of the wood is not just a tree. It is an entity, a place where you might leave a small offering, a ribbon, a bit of bread, to appease whatever dwells within. The church preaches that these are demons and tricks of the devil. But the village wisdom is older. Drop a comment with the medieval fact that surprised you most, or what role you think you'd play if you were born in the year 1287. Let's begin and live the life they never got to finish. The first cry is a gasp, a raw, wet sound in a room thick with the metallic scent of blood and the smoke of a tallow candle. You are born onto a straw pallet on a dirt floor, not into the hands of a doctor, but into the work-worn hands of a village midwife. You know who is secretly relieved by a spouse's death, who waters their ale, and who prays to a saint, not for salvation, but for a neighbor's crop to fail. This knowledge is a form of authority far heavier than the Reeves chain of office. His power is a matter of law and punishment. Yours is a matter of shared existence, a silent pact made in moments of profound vulnerability. In our modern, anonymous world, we pay strangers for the illusion of being heard. But the stone, blessed with a story you wove from moonlight and folklore, casts out the fear of the sickness. And in this world, fear is a plague all its own. The power of placebo was not a concept you could name, but it is a tool you wield every day. You see how a prayer can slow a racing heart, how a blessed charm can grant the courage needed to endure a long illness. Your failure is not a private matter between you and your patient. It is a communal wound. You have just reminded everyone, in the most visceral way, that the charms can fail, the herbs can wither, and the saints can turn a deaf ear. You have reminded them that they are all mortal, all gambling against a house that always wins. Was it a medical failure, or was it a social one? You walk on, past the well, feeling Thomas's gaze on your back like a brand. In this life, there is no difference between the two. You never learn to read. The world of ink and parchment, of clerk and cleric, is a foreign country. Your knowledge was never taken from a book. It was poured into you, a libation of memory from your grandmother's hands into yours. You are in the woods now, just as the sun begins to bleed through the canopy, and the air is still thick with the ghosts of the night. You kneel, the damp earth seeping into the worn wool of your skirts, your fingers stained with the memory of 100 other plants, close around a stem. He complains of a cough that rattles his ribs, a hacking, unproductive sound. His wife, he admits, says his temper has grown as fiery as the blacksmith's forge. You ask him to sit. You observe. This is your first, most sacred tool. His skin is flushed, a high, ruddy color that speaks of heat beneath the surface. You place your fingers on his wrist, and his pulse is not weak but to them, it was just Tuesday. It was the ache in their back from the harvest, the gnawing hunger of a lean winter, the brief, brilliant joy of a child's laugh, and the constant, chilling awareness that death was not a distant concept, but a house guest who might arrive at any moment, unannounced. This is Sleepy History. We are here to listen to the rustle of forgotten ghosts, to feel the texture of their days, and to understand that their survival was not a footnote, but a miracle. There is one place of refuge, of warmth and noise and life, the tavern. It is a smoky, crowded room, smelling of sour ale, wet wool, and unwashed bodies. Here, for the price of a single coin, you can buy a brief escape. The ale is thick and cloudy, more food than drink, and it dulls the edges of your exhaustion and your fear. The tavern is the village's nerve center. It is where news from the outside world arrives, carried by travelers. It is where gossip is traded like currency, where reputations are made and destroyed. It is a source of life. You go there for firewood to keep from freezing, for nuts and berries to supplement a meager diet, for timber to build your home. If you are skilled and daring, you might illegally hunt a rabbit or a deer on the Lord's land, a crime punishable by mutilation or death, but a risk worth taking when your children are hungry. The forest is the village's storeroom, its pharmacy, its lumber yard. But it is also the realm of the unknown. It is here that the Christian if you love immersive, real storytelling about survival, belief, and forgotten lives, hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. We will ask the difficult questions. What is the true meaning of progress when our anxieties simply change their shape? What is the difference between a prayer to a saint for a sick child and a desperate search for symptoms on the internet? The names of the demons change, but the fear remains. In tending to their bodies, you have inadvertently become the caretaker of their souls. The young man who helps in the stables, his heart sick with a love for the bailiff's daughter, a love that could see him whipped or banished, he told you. The old weaver, his lungs filling with fluid, who mapped the location of his life savings, 7 silver pennies, in the dirt floor with a shaking finger, he told you. You are the keeper of all the village secrets. You walk it deliberately, for you understand that they are not separate things. They are the body and soul of a single act of healing. To the people who seek you out, life is a constant war against unseen forces, against ill humors in the blood, curses whispered on the wind, or the quiet, creeping malice of a demon lodging in the gut. A purely physical cure is not enough. It does not answer the terror. It does not calm the spirit. The ginger tea soothes her stomach, yes. This is the terrible calculus of your art. You are not a physician of the body alone. You are the keeper of the village's hope. Hope is the most vital medicine in a world where death is a constant, unwelcome neighbor. Every time you succeed, a fever breaks, a wound closes, a babe is born crying and healthy, you feed that hope. You push death back from the door, and the entire community feels the warmth of the fire a little longer. But when you fail, the chill seeps back under every door, into every heart. It is a fragile candle lit against an overwhelming darkness. And for now, it is all they have. Chapter 4, The Four Humors, a flawed map. The heavy oak door groans shut, and the world outside, the mud, the shouting, the bleating of a lost sheep, is muted to a dull murmur. Before you stands Godwin, a farmer whose hands are maps of a life spent wresting sustenance from the soil. He does not look you in the eye. He looks at your shelf of dried herbs, at the charts of the heavens on your wall, as if the cure he seeks might be found there instead of in the mortal vessel of his own body. A life lived not on the page, but in the marrow of the bone, governed by the turning of the seasons and the ringing of the church bell. A life where your world is only as large as the distance you can walk in a day, and the most important knowledge you possess is how to tell edible mushrooms from poisonous ones, or how to set a broken bone with nothing but splints and linen. We forget these lives. We see their time as a dark prelude to our own enlightened age, a murky pit of superstition and squalor. It is the slow, painful birth of a justice system based not on divine whispers, but on human reason. But for now, you watch the accused man pray, knowing his fate rests not in the hands of men, but in the festering of a burn. The day's labor is done. The sun is a bloody smear on the horizon, and a chill is creeping in from the fields. Your back aches, your stomach is empty, and your mind is weary from the sheer monotony of survival. The songs she sings while spinning, the stories she tells her children by the fire, these are the threads of culture, the intimate legacy that history books forget. It is a quiet strength, the resilience of a willow that bends in the storm but does not break. The village ends abruptly. Beyond the last wattle and daub hut and the common pasture lies the forest. It is not the manicured parkland of a modern city. It is a vast, dark, and menacing wilderness. The forest is a place of duality. This is Sleepy History, where we explore the world not as it was recorded by the powerful, but as it was lived by the forgotten. We'll walk through a world governed by the rhythm of the seasons and the tolling of a church bell. A world where superstition was a form of science and a bad harvest was a death sentence. We will try to understand not just what they did, but what they believed, what they feared, and how, against all odds, they survived. The priest offers absolution for the afterlife. You, however, must deal with the consequences in this one. A winter without salted meat is not a spiritual failing. It is a physical sentence. It means hunger, weakness, and a shorter path to the grave for her children. You say nothing at first. You simply listen, and in the listening, you become a vessel. This is a trust born from the intimacy of the sick room, a place where all social armor is stripped away. You have set the bones of these people, delivered their babies, and closed the eyes of their dead. But you also know with a certainty as solid as that pebble, that her belief is a medicine more potent than any herb you possess. Her faith transformed a piece of the riverbed into a talisman. This is the secret you guard more closely than your remedies for fever or poultices for infection. The patient's mind is your most powerful ingredient. It is the soil in which all other cures must be planted. You live your life walking a line so thin it is invisible to others. On one side is remedy, on the other, ritual. You stop a few paces from him, your own throat tight. Thomas, you manage, the word a small, useless stone thrown into a vast, quiet sea. He gives a single, sharp nod. It is not a greeting. It is an acknowledgement of a debt that can never be paid. He doesn't blame you, not with words. Words are too clean, too direct. Blame is a contagion, and it is passed through the miasma of shared glances, of tightened shoulders, of conversations that stop the moment you draw near. His family's quiet sorrow has become your public shame. It was a recognition that healing touches on more than just the physical. It involves hope, ritual, and the mysterious, undeniable power of compassionate care. Ask yourself, in a world where death is a constant, unseen neighbor, is it the remedy that truly heals, or the simple, defiant act of trying? The mother's prayer and your poultice are born of the same root, a desperate refusal to do nothing. They are a testament not to ignorance, but to love, a quiet insistence that this small life, in this small hut, matters. We now pay for healthcare with insurance premiums and credit cards, transactions that are sterile and impersonal, designed to be forgotten. Your transactions were paid with the very stuff of life, binding you inextricably to the fates of your neighbors. Ask yourself, when your worth is tallied not in what you own, but in who owes you, are you truly free? Or are you just a prisoner in a kinder cage, held captive by the very lives you fought to save? The first prayer of the day is not for your soul, but for the fire to catch. You've never seen a toothbrush. You believe demons live in fog. Your town blames goats for the plague. Welcome to the Middle Ages. This is not a history of kings and queens, of jewel-encrusted crowns, or the grand architecture of faith. This is a history of the hearth, of the mud, of the quiet, desperate prayers whispered in the half-light of a hovel. This is the story of you,